Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Thank you, Christian, for joining today. Today we have Christian Smedberg, who is the marketing manager for Wenig-Holzher, and joining us today to talk a little bit about marketing in the millwork industry, talk a little bit about what that looks like in the industry as a whole, and as well as his role with Wenig-Holzher. Thanks for joining us, Christian.
It's great to be here. Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. I think to get started, would you tell us just a little bit about your background and your path to where you are today and how you got started in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't know how exciting it is, but I value it very much because I absolutely love this industry. I can't see myself anywhere else. And it was definitely not I would guess you would say it was not the career path I had in mind. I was young. Found myself in this industry back when I was in college, actually, and just looking for a job to start paying off a little bit of student debt. And that's when I got involved in the manufacturing shop. And that was my very first experience with the woodworking industry. I had zero experience. I know some guys are in our industry, they're like, oh yeah, like my dad was a carpenter, or my grandfather had a shop, and I didn't have any of that. I had no idea what any of this was until my last year in college. Started working in a shop, and it didn't take very long. I loved it. I loved being able to something with my hands with the help of a machine, and actually see that at the end of the day that like look, all material, and I made something that actually had value. And that was like I said, didn't take very long. I got bit, and I loved it. So forward, must have been going on 20 years now. So loved every minute of it. It's been great.
Awesome. So you are out of college, you got your first job in the manufacturing in the woodwork industry. How did you go from that role, working hands-on, to being involved in the marketing side of the business?
So that's kind of an interesting story too. That took a little bit longer, right? So when I first got involved in the industry, and right off the bat, I was like, man, I love this. I love this industry. It's an honest industry. It's a tangible industry. I love it. And as I started to kind of get the different factors that go into manufacturing, I got involved in some ad work, some thing work, at manufacture, and then that sort of morphed and transitioned into more of a gel, I know that's not like that's a gap to to go between, right? But for a situation that totally worked, that kind of led me into a thing, tasks, and then those tasks I found extremely enjoyable, and I thought to myself, well, that's where I want to really focus. I think that marketing, and we'll go into this more as we continue to talk, but I think that marketing in different businesses self in many different ways. And there's not one bucket is the marketing department that everybody needs. And therefore, folks like myself, we get into marketing in a lot of avenues, through a lot of different back doors. So that kind of came in through almost like a technical angle. And I think shows itself even today, even 20 years later. But I'll get into it through more of a creative angle. Maybe they're more of a content creator, a videographer, or whatever. And that's how they kind of enter. So it looks different for everyone in every different company.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about now your role at Wenig-Holzher, right? So now your full-time job is marketing manager, and you mentioned earlier that's expanding, but tell us, one, what does Wenig-Holzher do? And then what is your role specifically
absolutely.
there?
So Wenig-Holzher USA is the U.S. branch of Weinig, which is Germany. And they have subsidiaries all over the world. They're a manufacturing supplier, or a manufacturing equipment supplier, right? So we sell and service Weinig and their equipment, and though that equipment is predominantly for the woodworking industry. And that would include things such as molders. Weinig's very much known for their molders, whether it be 6-head molders all the way up to high-speed jointed molders. And there's so much other equipment out there that the Weinig group provides: rip saws, chop saws, finger joiners, panners, and that's just the solid wood part of it. Then there's the whole panel side, which is the Holzer brand, and Holzer, provides seam machines, edge banders, horizontal beam saws or vertical panel saws. They do vertical CNCs. So there's a whole equipment that is underneath the Wenig-Holzher umbrella. I have been with Weinig, and the first step into really the machinery side of the industry. So I was in fact right up until 5 years ago when I came here to Wenig-Holzher, and the side of things was a bit of an adjustment, because as manufacturers, you work with machinery, but you don't work. But it's do a totally different job than if you were, say, trying to sell or service that machinery. That's not what you're there. It's there to help you. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're trying to keep it. It was an come into the machinery side of it and see how much really into this side of our industry, and how much knowledge really is on the machinery side of things.
So you went from working for a company that was like
Exactly.
a customer of a Wenig-Holzher, for example, and now you're on the supplier side specifically of this.
Absolutely, yes. Aspect. And that was really neat, right? So, I remember first coming on board at Weinig, it was very much a, like, oh, I know Weinig. They make, this mold, because that's what was shock. And then you get to Weinig, right, and there's like, machines that they make too. And you're like, oh, I didn't even know that these things existed. Like I had no idea. And because I was in more of the solid wood manufacturing side of things, I knew when I came on board, I didn't know anything about Holzer. I didn't know much about cabinet making at all because that wasn't the manufacturing aspect I was in. And as you know, cabinet making is a huge part of the woodworking industry here in the States. So I had to a manufacturing process that, manufacturing, just so I could better understand how our machines played a part in that.
Yeah. So just for some of our listeners who we may be speaking Greek to, so there's, in the millwork industry, there's kind of two halves as far as the type of materials of woodworking. And Wenig-Holzher is an interesting case study in this because you have two halves of the company. Weinig, which services mostly the solid woods, and Holzer, which is the panel processing. And again, for those listeners who that might not make sense to, think of panel processing as sheet goods. So if you go to a big box store and plywood in 4x8 sheets, cabinet making generally refers to the breaking down of those and making boxes and cabinets and assemblies and things from those. Whereas the millwork side generally refers to solid wood processing and making things like moldings, trims, face frames, hardwoods, and those obviously in our industry overlap a ton. But there's, in the manufacturing aspect, there's shops that generally specialize in more one or the other. So like my background, I started in a door company.
Really?
That was almost all molding.
Sure.
Like we were breaking down rough sawn sapili and stuff like that. And then I got into more of the casework millwork side, which is mostly panel processing. And then almost every shop has a little bit of both. You might have a shaper or a joiner or thing to do mild. But when you get into serious solid wood manufacturing, like you mentioned, you have big molders that are multi-head molders that you pass in rough sawn lumber through one side and it comes out a molding at the other end. And so that's the Weinig side. And from my background, I know people that are always, hey, I need to go get new knives. I'm going to call Weinig and get knives for my shaper. I'm going to get molder knives and things like that, or the whole machine, obviously. Holzer, most people on the panel processing side probably think of it as edge banding. A lot of people have Holzer edge banders, and then they might have another brand of something else. But as you mentioned, Holzer also makes pretty much the whole suite of
Absolutely. And you're
processing
spot on.
machines.
I mean, like Weinig's flagship is the molder, Holzer's flagship is the edge bander. Those are the two predominant in the catalog for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Now diving a little bit
So,
more
so,
into
so,
now marketing.
sorry. Before we
Go
move
ahead.
on from that topic, just so the other thing that's super interesting that I didn't know, and maybe somebody listening to this didn't really know either. You said yourself, and you're absolutely right, is that when you go into shops here in the States, there's normally a little bit of both, right? Like that's just how it is in
Mhm.
shops, especially if you're doing face frames. They'll have some solid wood equipment to make those face frames, right? But what's crazy
Yeah.
and what I didn't know is that the US is pretty much the only place in the world that's like that. You go over to Europe and they're completely separate, like 100% separate, and you don't
Right.
get that kind of commingling of material in a single shop. It's wild. So that's something that if you haven't looked at shops in other parts of the world, something that's a little bit unique to us. Yeah.
But is important in, I imagine, especially in your role in marketing and diving a little bit more into that,
Yep.
is understanding
Absolutely.
your audience and understanding, okay, who are our customers? Who are we
Right.
marketing to? Can you tell us a little bit about, okay, obviously you've
Mhm.
been in this role for 5 years. I'm sure it's evolved, but what does your role entail and what does marketing
Sure.
for
Yeah. So
Wenig-Holzher look like?
it's but all basics. So for Wenig-Holzher here in the U.S., we handle most of our own marketing to the U.S. market. So we'll handle things, for example, like advertising, social media, digital marketing, and event, which is a part of our marketing. We also handle a lot of our
Mhm.
sales team support, which I'll get into as being a part of the marketing duties, right? So, and now we're here in the U.S. from the quarter we're in Germany, where they have a marketing team as well that kind of looks after um, the world, specifically the parts of the world that don't have their own marketing folks. And but any support need we get from them as well, and they do an absolutely tremendous job of providing graphics, machine information, all in a very, I would say, effect to us. So then we can kind of put our own little US spin on it and distribute it out to our markets. So a little bit of I don't want to say a middleman, but a little bit of an interpreter, I guess you would say, of
Yeah.
information. But yeah, so that's the aspect at Wenig-Holzher. We really do kind of go into a lot of different areas of marketing. And then I also do here is I also focus on internal solution automation. Basically, what it means is I look at Wenig-Holzher USA as a company, our internal processes, and I see where can we automate processes to make the customer experience with our company better. So that plays actually a lot into the marketing role. But instead of finding the customer, taking care of the customer once they're in a order process, once they are looking at other offerings, etc. So once we have a relationship with them, I'm looking at processes that interact with that customer and how can we make those processes better and more valuable. Yeah,
So you mentioned that a big part is live in-person
100%.
events and stuff. And I imagine a lot of people probably hear
Yep.
marketing, they just think social media,
Yep.
websites, like ads, that type of stuff. And particularly our niche industry, like so much of your customer base and audience doesn't exist on those platforms, I imagine,
Well,
right?
I don't know. Exist. Maybe, you know, and
They're
maybe
not
not, I don't know how to be active. Maybe I don't know, but I
right.
think I know what yeah, yeah. And you're right. I know what you're getting at, and you're 100% right. So the woodworking industry, if you're listening to this, you probably have a little bit of a sense of what the woodworking industry is. I like to say that as far as technology goes, especially when it comes to like office technology and marketing technology, we're usually, I don't know, 5 to 10 years behind. That's not a bad thing. That's just who we are. It's all good. Like no judgment whatsoever. But you said it before, you have your audience. So if you're in marketing in this industry, you have to understand who your audience is and what they're doing in order to start that buying journey, that journey. That journey's quite long. As you can imagine, buying a machine is normally a very long journey. If you are such like, I don't know, like cabinet doors, stuff like that, there's still a journey there. There's absolutely a journey of a new customer understanding who you are, what makes your product, understanding your USP and making that decision to work with you. There's still a process. It's probably not as long as, say, buying a molder. It's absolutely, so you kind of have to understand who your customer is, and then where is that starting place that they are. Where are they when they're ready to start that journey? I like to think, I truly do think that actually many of my customers are on social media. They absolutely are. They are not looking for molders on social media, though. Like, that's not what they're doing. They're
Right.
unwinding after a day in the shop or a day at the office, and they're feed up and scrolling through their Instagram feed or looking at, what's going on Facebook. They're like, oh, you know what? Like, I do need that 6-head mold. Like, that's just, like, that's not them. Now, that's not to say we don't have a presence there, but that is to say that all these pieces of knowledge, all these data points, then all kind of get crunched in my head as far as, okay, and how are we going to reach people at the beginning of their journey? And a lot of journey starts in person. I mean, you can't really, I shouldn't say you can't separate times, you can, but many times you don't. That's why trade fairs are so important to machinery suppliers. That's why in-house are. That's why also a lot of times when you're just out in the field, that's why we all have sales teams, right? I came from a manufacturer. We didn't have a single salesperson. It was marketing, and then it was customer service who takes in the orders, or you call it order processing, right? There was no, it was like catalog sales, right? You didn't have people who were banging on doors, knocking on doors, trying to sell stuff. You were just waiting for the phone to ring, and the phone rang a bunch because we marketed. Well, that's a very short journey, and that might for some, but for Wenig-Holzher, it's a journey. You need a sales team to help develop those relationships and make sure that Wenig-Holzher is represent when that customer is ready to start thinking about going down that investment. So, yeah, and long and short.
No, I think that's a good summary. And I think because obviously I want people to hear and learn about you. I want people to learn and hear about Wenig-Holzher, but also to have some valuable insights and takeaways. And a lot of our listeners may be on the supplier side, but most of them are probably on the manufacturing side, right? And I think what's important is those concepts you talked about when you're thinking about marketing, because from my perspective, our industry doesn't really understand what marketing is by and large, right? And those are my words, not yours. But I think that we are behind the times. I think a lot of times, and this is not just our industry in general, but people don't understand why are they marketing. They don't have. It's to have a presence. I think a lot of people think of it as checking the box. We've got a website, we got a LinkedIn, and we just exist, and that's part of it. But what you just said there, I think then to take it the other extreme, a lot of people look at it and say, why should I do that if this effort doesn't directly lead to a sale? And it's not that black and white. It's a lot in between. And that's the understanding that, okay, just existing is important, right? Because when people say, hey, I do need that molder, do they think of Wenig-Holzher as an option? They're maybe not scrolling through LinkedIn or Instagram and shopping right then for the molder, but when that need arises, do they know you exist and how to find you? And do they look at you to trust? I think the other aspect that's important is people, even when they get over that hump and they say, okay, we're going to put some effort into marketing, we're going to create some content. Who is that content speaking to? And are you selling a product, or are you selling the solution to their problem? And whose problem is that? And it's also important to understand, because I think a lot of like software companies, for example, in the millwork industry, don't do a good job of this. They market to the users, but the users are not the buyers.
Same with
the users
machines.
are not the decision makers. So for example, if you are only marketing to the operators, those operators aren't the ones writing the check. And so it's important to speak in a way that the check writer understands, hey, are my guy's going to like this? Is it going to use it? But more and so,
Yep.
is it going to solve a business problem, and how is it going to do that? And so I think there's this big leap companies need to make when we're going to market. Okay, we're going to put some stuff out there. Then do we have a purpose behind it? And do we understand what we're trying to
the purpose driven aspect of it is, I think, important. But I go back to kind of what I was saying when we first this whole thing off, which is like, so every company is different, right? And so every time someone asks, well, should I be doing this or should I? The answer is going to be a little bit different because they're a different company. And that was one of the things that I want to drive home to anyone in this industry listening to. I've talked to so many people in this industry, and they always and a lot of manufacturers ask me marketing questions like, well, should I be more active on LinkedIn? Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. Only you know, because only
Right.
you know where your audience is. But hear me out on this, is that you cannot get paralyzed trying to figure it out and do nothing, right? Because that is then just that's death to you. We get into this. We kind of get into this of I have to figure it out. I have to figure out marketing before I market. And that's a myth. And I don't feel like that official approach to almost anyone. In what I like to always kind of think about is that saying, don't let perfect get good, right? You can't let you get into this thing where it's like, well, I'm going to I know my audience is on the best post on LinkedIn, and I'm going to post it, and I'm going to do it on Tuesday. And, it's just like, no, just put something up. Like, you don't have to, you don't have to, put all this thought and strategy. Because more than likely what's going to happen is come Tuesday, you're going to be like, you know what? I found out that I don't have time to market. No, yes, you do. You just don't have time to market perfectly, right? But you do have time to market. During COVID, I still learn this, right? I'm no, it's very topic, but during COVID, there was this time where all of a sudden, from a machinery supplier perspective, the world ended because we weren't able to go see people in person, and we weren't able to have people come see our machines. And that's a big thing, right? So then we transitioned heavily into video. And we were not, if we waited to be at putting out videos of explaining our machine, we still probably wouldn't have to this day. And instead, since we put out something like 250 hours of video content, and it's one of those things where it's like, again, if you get paralyzed waiting to be perfect at this strategy that you have in your head that's going to work, you end up not doing anything. You finally do it, it doesn't work, and you get so discouraged that you never try marketing again. Because you're like, well, you know what? I put a lot of time and effort into this magazine ad, and I didn't get one phone call, right? It's like, okay, you just another approach. And time, don't put, hours into it, 2 hours into it, make it good, not perfect, and see what works. Because once you see what works, you start seeing where your audience
Right.
actually is.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece there, is that by starting and by doing and not trying to wait till it's perfect,
Right.
you learn by doing, and you actually gain. And so I think that's important, is once you start, is gathering insights and data and information about, okay, did we get a response from this path? Do we get a better response from this other thing that we tried? Okay, let's try something else and then see if we can learn from that and improve the results. And you do get better by doing it, as well as you yield better results as long as you're adjusting.
A lot of people
and
forget that first benefit that you just pointed out. You actually get better at doing it, not just because you figure out what works, but because you're doing it more often, right? But you're just practicing. Maybe it's creation, it's writing, it's videography, it's photography, it's graphics, it's whatever. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you become with it, like whether you like it or not. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. Yep. So the
Awesome.
other
So,
kind of the other thing I really want to mention, because I feel this is overlooked in our industry, and I really hope that manufacturers, specifically our industry, understand this. I'm going to kind of go into another area of what I is marketing, but maybe we overlook it sometimes. Is this idea that sales and marketing are like these separate entities. They're responsible for different things, and they don't work together. And you might work off the other, but very indirect way. And that was a actually that I had for a very long time, until it was shattered when I came here to Weinig. Uh, because, and I think that a lot of people probably listening to this podcast have some sort of a sales team, whether that's internal or external. Maybe they have reps who rep their products to other manufacturers, maybe component manufacturer, or a large guy who's selling to others. Or if you are an actual, say, like a cabinet manufacturer, maybe you have dealers that are selling to builders, or you have reps that are going and trying to sell your cabinets to, whether they be distributors or whomever. The point is that marketing, and this is 100% true, part of marketing is the less creative, the less sexy part, which is your sales team with the data and the information that they need, when they need it, and how they want it. That is, I think we forget about that a lot. We get so focused on, well, I'm going to make this great ad, or we're going to be posting on social media like every day. We're going to be putting these great pictures of our products up there and all that great stuff. But I'll tell you, if you have a sales team, they are not equipped with the best, most accurate, amazing data that you can equip them with, you are doing a disservice to them. And that is a marketing function, is equipping them to do their job. And that's something that, again, I've learned that personally over the last 4 or 5 years. Having a sales team now and giving them information that they need. I would not expect my sales team to know every single configuration of every single machine. Like, it's too much, right? No one's going to actually know that in their head. So how do I information to them? Again, these are specs of machines. This isn't fancy glittery stuff. This is really like nuts and bolts of product configuration, right? But how do I get that to a sales team member in a way that they can reference it? Not so much that they can learn it. I don't need them to learn it. I need them to learn how to find it and to make it as easy as possible to find. So that's I think that's part of marketing that we sometimes.
so specifically, because when you first started describing this, I was thinking like data
Yeah, no.
on analytics or things. But what you're describing is
Yes.
literally materials and content for salespeople to
100%.
utilize in their work. Hey, here's the specs and here's materials
Yeah.
you can take with you to this client for reference that says, hey, here's the machines we offer, and in a format
Right.
that supports whatever they're doing, if they're going visiting on site or if they need to reference.
Yeah, that's exactly
download
right.
files,
So
whatever that
sometimes
is, I
we
assume, right?
look at that as we say, well, we've put together. I'm going to go back to being a door manufacturer for a second. So we've put together this great catalog with all of our doors, and we're going to give it to all of our sales guys in order to then they can give that out to their customers. Well, that's great, but want your sales people they should have more knowledge than just what's in the catalog, right? They should understand lead times. They should understand material specifications. They should entire color catalog. They need to understand pricing and program models that you may have, right? So where's all that information residing? And are they equipped in understanding all that? Not just a very simple, here's the product, this is what it looks like, or this is what it does. You mentioned the Holzer edge. You go in and say, well, Holzer has the best. They put edges on boards, right? And this is why they do it better than the competition.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but a lot of guys are then going to ask, all right, well, how that's a common question. All right, around. Okay, that's a little bit more. And tell me about, does it have a buffing station and a spraying station? Great. Well, now tell me about the servos. How many units are servos versus manual? So now we're getting into more like the weeds, and that's something that's not going to be in some catalog that you're going to do. That's going to be actually equipping your sales team with the actual nuts and bolts of the product that they're trying to sell or the service that they're trying to sell. So at Wenig-Holzher, so we do that through a mobile app. So we've developed an app specifically for us to use internally that equips, that helps our sales team understand like I said, like the nuts and bolts of not just configuration, because like I said, it's not always just the specs about the products, but the specs about the entire business. Anything that they need to know, we try to get it into an app that they have access to. This goes back into the what, the when, and the how, right? It's the what is the information, but then it's the when and the how. Well, when can they access it? Anytime. And how can they access it? Well, they just open up their app, into a millwork shop probably 4 years ago. It was a component shop. It wasn't a millwork shop. It was a component shop. They made CNC components for various cabinet guys and whatever. And I think they had something like 4 or 5 guys that are like out in the road, right? And then they had probably 3 office staff and like the owner, and then they had the shop, right? And I walked in there, and man, that place was like, it was like you kicked over an anthill. Like it was just like buzzing. Like it was crazy. The phones were ringing off the hook. Everyone was busy. Like people like trying multitasking, and it was wild. You walked in there and you're like, man, like they're killing it. Like this is wild, right? At minutes you realize that all the phone calls are just the sales guy information. Has this customer paid? What can I get this? Or what to get this, and what's the lead time for anything that's getting run on the CNC? Like it's like all these questions, but that's a perfect example of where that marketing actually enhancing the job of the sales team. It should be actually more efficient. They should have information at their fingertips instead of all this back and forth about everything, because I just thought it was hilarious. And they're killing it, and then you realize, you're like, wait a minute, I don't think they're actually talking to a single customer. So yeah.
Awesome. So I assume that's part of, and going into the next topic where you said your role is also largely now supporting internal process automation and stuff. So I assume
the
that
app's
app
just
is
one example of how
one
we
of those
continue
things.
to, automate and become more efficient in kind of stepping away from marketing, but a little bit in the same vein, is whenever we look at internal process, and that could be anything from quoting a job to equipping your sales team. But we look at that internal process, going back, like, why am I doing it? Going back to that purpose-driven question. The answer to that should always be to provide more value to my end customer. So that's something, because we can automate a lot if those automations are really just, if they don't actually add any, if they're just making somebody's job a bit easier, but it never actually touches that end customer, then that's more of a lower priority to do. You want to make your process, your end customer can have a better experience. This is where I think that's very interesting, that more software in our industry, and maybe you can speak to more software in our industry, is bridging both the front office and the back, being that kind of that order processing software and that kind of production software, kind of being both. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, you're making whatever you're doing, and you're making it more efficient. You want that to bring value to your end customer on the front end.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think more for manufacturers, that is a huge gap that I think there's a wide spectrum of companies. There's still tons and tons of companies who are running these very old school, very manual. And there's some that are starting to adopt software like Energy, like Project Pack, like things that help them with bridging from the estimate up front, like all the way through to production. And I believe that is absolutely vital for companies to survive. I think one of the biggest problems that companies have, in my opinion, stems from, and this is a whole other podcast topic, but stems from not having the data and the ability to tie those things together to be able to make informed business decisions based on real-time information. So things like capacity planning, and what that leads to is I make a decision today that I don't yield the results of until 3-6 months down the road. And what happens is I didn't sell enough work today for a bucket 6 months down the road. And then I end up having to lay people off then when I could have done something now. Or I am selling, there's a lot of things like that forced your hand down the road that if you had the information in a better way today, that you could foresee. And so I do think that's valuable. Tying it back to what you're talking about, informing your sales team, having the most up-to-date information to be able to make those decisions, I think is related to that. So obviously from a supplier standpoint, it's a lot more easy to think that way. Hey, we're selling product, the product's already made, right? It's kind of cataloged. How do I have this information? But manufacturers, like millwork manufacturers, I think that everybody, too often we write it off as, oh, what we do is too complex and too hard and too custom. It's just impossible. And it's, you have rails, like you can sit down and say, hey, here's these options. It doesn't mean we don't do anything off of that, but you can make your processes easier, both for the upfront sales team, because one, what happens in reality, so for those millwork manufacturers, because I've been running engineering departments for 10, 12 years now, right? And what's always happened is sales will go sell the world and say, yep, we can do this and this. We turn that into something. We always try to take that. And after you hand that over to operations, project management, we convert that and say, they told you we can give you the moon. Here's actually what we like to provide. And we're going to try to convert that into a catalog. Engineering, our job is literally to say, hey, they sold you this custom cabinet that the architect drew that doesn't exist. We actually would rather provide this. And if those two front of house, back of house are talking up front, they can inform estimating and sales of, I'm talking about manufacturers now, of, hey, here's what we want to provide. Can you steer them towards these catalog items? And here's the options that are built into that. Hey, we can provide 12 different types of door slides. We can provide you any type of pole, but we only want to provide you
and
different types of milling.
It goes back to who are actually selling your product, right? And giving them the information that they need to know when they need to know it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I imagine a lot of the way you're bridging that, and the reason why marketing is able to facilitate that one, is because you're talking more towards the specific now to Wenig-Holzher, right? I imagine to be able to market effectively, you're having to extract that data, talking to R&D, talking to engineer, whoever it isn't, right? And the manufacturer equivalent of that is, hey, is your marketing team talking to manufacturing and production and saying, hey, how do we actually build this? Whereas your sales team is entirely client focused. So you're bridging from what we actually do to our client, and you're filling that gap, whereas sales, allowing them to basically be entirely client focused.
Yeah.
Getting that information
and again,
from
bridging that gap, not so much with a person, but with tools. Right. And personally, I think the more we can bring into those tools, the better, because again, you don't want to be tied to that model where, people are constantly having to get information from the office when they need it. Right. So, yeah.
Building on that, but going back to something you talked about earlier, is COVID obviously was a big change for you guys, right? And have you gone completely back to how you were before COVID, or what changes have changed now that you've stuck and have refined the way you guys work going forward?
I guess that's just how it is. But of course we changed, and we go back to being exactly the same. I think the world is never going to be exactly the same. So we have the pendulum, let's just say that, right? So I don't think that, I personally don't, that the pendulum swinging to a point of being normal again. I think we're still a few years away having a tried and true way of doing things post pandemic. We're still trying to figure that out. I'll throw out a couple examples.
Are there
Are probably the biggest example in industry of something that got completely disrupted. So there was a couple shows where a couple large got canceled. So folks just were not able to show off their new equipment or their new solutions to customers as they normally did, and that hurt a lot of people, and they had to pivot really quickly. If they chose to do that, some didn't choose to do that and just said, we'll when this is all over." And the supply chain, affected a lot of mainers, not just customers as well, affected everybody. So that was this disruption that ultimately was a disruption in consumer expectations, right? So we, as consumers now speaking, we our expectations completely got disrupted. We were so used to certain things working a certain way, and then all of a sudden they didn't work that way, and you couldn't just go to somebody else and expect it to work that way. It's like they weren't working for anybody, right? So that was a big thing that we're still kind of, again, still trying to find where that is. And I think our expectations settling too, they're still a little bit all over the place, right? You still have some, you still have some customers that are like, hey, I want my stuff right now. I don't know why I can't have it yesterday. I want it. And you have others that are like, well, the world's upside down, so I'll take it whenever I can get it. Right. So I think we're trying to kind of find where those expectations will be normalized.
right? Definitely. And I think obviously it's affected how you
Yep,
guys do business,
absolutely.
but also more importantly, how your customers do business. Are there trends that you've seen from what you know about marketing, what you're learning about your customers that you've seen
Yeah.
or are seeing that you think
So
are trending
specifically
a
in
certain
marketing
way
in
that you're
our
learning
industry,
from
I
in the
think
industry?
that if the pandemic did anything, these pushed us into a more of a digital marketing arena. What we were kind of like circling it for, I don't know, a decade or so. We finally kind of went in the front door and checked it out to see all about. So I think that was actually that was a step for the industry. I think that a lot of folks really embraced video during that time, and that's still a trend now. A lot more. You were saying like we're kind of a tradition. A lot traditional folks in the are now looking at, okay, well, how can I embrace video? What do I need to come out, even if it's just, hey, I want to come up in the overview video because I just need it. What I need to do to it to get that? What's involved? What resources are involved? So I think more folks are looking at that through that perspective. So more people are embracing video, which is great. I think that's great. And I also trend why we will actually now coming out of COVID, I think we will trend in the near future. To a how can I say this? Like not an influx, but not only come back, but I think they're going to be enhanced as they come back. So, and maybe not trade fairs as much as smaller events like association events, open houses, times to get people together to share ideas. I think that's now in the industry. Again, that might be a post-COVID thing. Just because we were kind of out of each other's shops for 2 or 3 years, but I think that's going to, in the next few years, that's going to grow. Our guy, everybody in this industry loves to go see because it's not so much, unlike other industries,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bajillion make a cabinet, to set up your molder, to run crown molding. So, I mean, being that in other shops is always thought that way. So I think that now coming post pandemic, it will people kind of travel out and see what's going on in other shops.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Is there
Yeah,
anything
I
else
don't.
that
So
you would like to
we
share that
talked a
we
lot
didn't
about
get to yet?
marketing um and trends and such, and Wenig-Holzher. I guess just wanted to kind of is that I touched on this when you asked me how I got here. And I told you how I love it, and I think that and it's I'm kind of privileged to be in that you like. You sometimes that some folks work job that they may enjoy, but they really don't in the industry that job is actually benefiting. I can't speak enough about, we could do a whole podcast probably, about the woodworking industry and how it is a clean, honest in work with a resource that is one of the most amazing resources on planet Earth. We get to see, I guess you would say, the fruits of feel and see the products that we create at the end of the day.
Mhm.
We take a raw material and we put it into our machines and we get to actually then assemble it. There's like different steps. It's cool. We talk about automation a lot in shops. So, there's a point where hands, touch them, and that's just really, again, just the clean, honest that you get from being in an industry. And I hope that everyone who's listening to this, who's in the woodworking industry, understands just how great and how lucky they are to industry. I think of other industries. No judgment. It's all good. I hope you like the bias. I just think that it's one of the best on earth. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I started out going to school for architecture, and
Right.
I stuck with woodworking because I loved being able to see the tangible results of what we do, the work we do, what we make, and everything that we do and make is
Yeah.
something that people use on a day-to-day basis. It shapes our spaces, it shapes our functional spaces as well. And I think that's really awesome.
Oh.
There's two questions I try to ask at my guests before we go. So what do you see changing
Yeah.
in our industry over the
So
next 5 to 10 years?
wow, that's the answer is that there much more shop floor automation in the next 5 to 10 years. That's the easy answer. And I think no one
Mhm.
would say that there would be less. So I don't know if that
Yep.
counts, but if that's my answer would be think, and I really really hope that we will see uh, better and more diversified materials in the side of things. I really hope that we can to develop types of sheet goods, types of materials that are um, other types of byproducts or recycled material. That's a trend. You kind of see it a little bit. I know, you go to the airs, like the furniture have different types of furniture made out of, panel stock that's made out like the byproduct rice harvest or whatever, and it's that's so cool, and we can continue that sort of trajectory. I think that would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I love that answer.
Oh wow.
So on the flip side then, what do you see staying the same?
So I know that I think for the most part our cabinetry will stay sounds crazy, but um I think cabinet construction will stay the same, and maybe we've been introducing new ways to construct cabinets for who knows how many years. I mean, there's so many ways. And when somebody in their shop finds for them, they need to do it that way. And so I'm not sure if if the world of cabinets here in
Yeah.
the States is going to be changing all over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's going to stay pretty much the same. Like I said, for the good or for the bad, that's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. I think those are good answers.
Yeah.
So if people would like to
Yeah.
reach out,
Yeah.
contact
So the
you,
best
find
way
out
is
more about
LinkedIn.
or
So that's kind of
Wenig-Holzher, what's the best
my
way they can do that?
professional platform of choice. So easily Christian Smedberg, then, and I'm fairly active for him as well. So if you're curious about thoughts about the industry or what I put out or videos that I make, on best way is just go on there and look for me.
Awesome. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with us today and
Absolutely.
share about marketing and your journey. So
Yeah, we'll have to talk again.
and hope to have you on again sometime in the near future.
I will. I'll be at the Vegas show.
Yeah, you're gonna be
anyone
at
who's
the Vegas show,
listening is gonna be
AWFS?
there, stop
Awesome.
by and we'll meet in person.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be there as well and would love to meet up. Thanks, Christian.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.